Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marjorie Malte, and welcome to NYU Canada Online Workshops. Our YouTube live chat is open, and we will be fielding questions throughout the workshop, so please feel free to post any comments or questions. Today's presenter is a social worker at the Artist Health Center here in Toronto, and a former acrobat with Le Cirque du Soleil. He's been part of the NYU Canada mental health team since summer 2018. Please welcome Matt Eldridge. Good afternoon, Matt.
All right, thanks, Marjorie. My name is Matt. I'm very happy to be here. I hope that you can all see and hear me okay. So I am the coordinator and social worker for the Alan Malcolm Green Artist Health Center. I'm also a psychotherapist in private practice. Just a quick note about the Artist Health Center. So we're a clinic that's designed for the health and well-being of artists. So the idea is that in order to help artists continue to make their art, we have to keep them healthy. And so we're a range of different physical and mental health services. I hope that you're all keeping well throughout the pandemic. I always get a little bit nervous at the beginning of my talks and a little bit nervous with the online form. This is the first time that I've given a talk online, but I'm happy to be here. It's certainly a new experience for me. I tend to like to keep my presentations interactive. So if you're comfortable, I'd love for you to share your thoughts and ask questions along the way. Just a quick disclaimer that this is not group therapy. The presentation is more so about offering skills and tools to help you to take care of yourselves. And I'm going to throw in some information on mental health for artists specifically, since I'm talking to the and why give this talk? Well, like for me personally, I want you to know that there are tools that you can use to take care of your mental health. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Also, that we're here for you and want to support you, and that you and your mental health matter, that you matter. The arts matter. That's another reason why I really like offering talks and workshops to artists, because art really matters. Like obviously those involved in the arts in any capacity have always known that. But I think really, especially during this pandemic, it's really shown us how crucial the arts are to our society. Like I personally couldn't imagine what this pandemic would be like for me if I didn't have access to things like music and film and television and books and dance and visual arts. For me, one of the most helpful things has been watching Andrew Lloyd Webber's musicals. I've been taking ballet classes with the National Ballet of the Netherlands, and RuPaul's Drag Race has been especially helpful to me. So all that being said, it's important for us to keep our artists healthy, both physically and mentally, so we can continue to have art in our world. Just a little bit about my own journey with mental health throughout this pandemic. At the beginning, I did find it very overwhelming. I found myself really not wanting to accept the reality of the situation, like literally say things like, I don't want this to be happening. I wish it wasn't happening. I don't want things to shut down. I just want things to keep going normally. And then I sort of switched, and then I became sort of anxious about the virus, and I wanted to have everything shut down. And I was sort of worried about myself getting sick and other people getting sick. So like really for me at the beginning, I was experiencing a pretty high level of anxiety. And during times like that, when we're feeling really overwhelmed, we want to use a set of skills that we call distress tolerance skills. So those are skills that we can practice when our emotions are at a very high level to help to bring them down. These skills are from a type of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. The first acronym, I'm going to share a couple of acronyms. I like my acronyms. Psychotherapy likes its acronyms. The first one is called the TIP skill. Okay, so TIP stands for temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing. The T for temperature, what that means is really, really cold temperature can help to cut the intensity of an emotion that you're experiencing. So that could look like taking a very, very cold shower, or it could look like holding ice, whether that be in your hands or maybe to your forehead or to your chest or to the back of your neck. Cold, like for me, cold is not a pleasant feeling, but the cold shower for me is actually really effective. It can really help to pretty immediately cut the intensity of anxiety that you're experiencing. The I stands for intense exercise. And so what that means is doing exercise really so intensely, you can really do it longer than a few minutes. Really, it's the intensity that we're going for there. It doesn't matter what type of exercise it is, whether it be running or push-ups or sit-ups or jumping jacks. We really just want to go for intensive exercise. Again, for me, that's a big one. Like when I'm feeling overwhelmed in any kind of way, I do find that the more intense that I exercise, the more of an effect that it actually has on my sensations, and the more that I'm able to alleviate some of the symptoms of overwhelm or anxiety. And then the P stands for paced breathing. So what that means is, as simple as it might sound, one of the most effective things that we can do for our mental health when we're feeling overwhelmed is to pay attention to the breath. It's such a common thing to take short, shallow breaths when we're feeling overwhelmed. And one of the most effective things that we can do is bring our attention to our breath, focus on taking long, deep breaths, and very specifically trying to breathe into our bellies. Like imagining that there's a balloon in your belly, and breathing in and breathing out, extending the balloon, having it come back in. When we're breathing into our stomach, we're stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. And so it's effective for us when feeling overwhelmed to really try to bring our attention to deep belly breathing. I'm going to share with you a couple of more what we call distress tolerance skills. The second one is self-soothing. So what that means is paying attention to your five senses while paying attention to things that are really soothing for you. So we can even try it out just quickly if you have a drink or a snack. I've got my coffee here. We want to bring our attention first to what it looks like. And the reason for this is that if you're paying attention to your five senses, your mind is not in the past, not in the future. It's just kind of here in the right now. So what I want to do is really bring my attention to what it looks like. If it's warm, you want to bring your attention to what it feels like, certainly what it smells like. So you can spend some time just paying attention to the smell, what it tastes like, of course. The coffee doesn't really have a sound to it, so I might skip over that one. But self-soothing is about bringing your five senses to attend to things that are really soothing. And that can be different for different people, but what I might encourage you to do is to try to think about things that are really soothing for you, whether it be nice things to smell, nice things to look at, nice things to listen to, nice things to taste, or nice things to touch. And try to practice attending to those things with your five senses, with the benefits being multiple. Like one, that if you're bringing your attention to your five senses, again, your mind is not past or future, it's just kind of here in the right now. And the second thing is that if we're really attending to things that are potentially soothing, it can help to alleviate the symptoms of anxiety, distress, overwhelm, whatever it is that you're experiencing in that moment. Okay. I hope everybody is still with me. I hope everybody's doing okay. The last distress tolerance skill that I'm going to share with you is called radical acceptance. Radical acceptance, we say, is one of the most difficult skills to practice. Also one of the most important. I did have a hard time with acceptance, certainly at the beginning of the pandemic. Like I said, I didn't want to accept the reality of the situation. One interesting thing that I'm noticing about myself is difficulty accepting the reopening as well. So in Ontario, a part of the phase 1 reopening plan included one-on-one counseling. It also included gymnastics, and as a little bit of an aside, I'm a trampoline coach. With the phase 1 reopening, that meant that two really major parts of my life were starting to reopen again. I found myself having this anxious reaction, thinking I don't want that to happen. As much as deep down I really do want the pandemic to be over, I was in a place where I had a hard time accepting that it was perhaps time to greet people in person again. So with situations like that, I encourage the skill of radical acceptance. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Like, radical acceptance means accepting with the mind, body, and soul. It's when we stop fighting against reality. It doesn't mean approving of things. It doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean giving up. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see some comments in the chat there. And why should we accept reality? Well, according to dialectical behavior therapy, in order to change reality, we must first accept reality. That even though those things seemingly are opposite, they can and do exist at the same time. That in order for us to see change, we must first accept reality. When we reject reality, pain can turn into suffering. And acceptance, it can lead to sadness, but deep calmness usually follows afterwards. The next question that I always get is, well, that sounds very nice, but how do I practice this skill of radical acceptance? And we do have some things that you can try to practice. The first step is observing that you're questioning or fighting reality. Like, try to just notice things that you might say, like, it shouldn't be this way, or I don't want it to be this way. Try to remind yourself that the unpleasant reality is just as it is. The next step is paying attention to our bodies. So that's something that I'm really interested in, that our mental health exists in our bodies as well. And we can practice shifts with our bodies to help our minds become more accepting. In dialectical behavior therapy, we talk about the skill of willing hands, which is kind of sitting up with the palms facing upwards. And the idea is that if we're open with our bodies, potentially can be more open with our minds. With our bodies, we can also practice relaxation exercises or practice that deep belly breathing that we talked about before. And try to think about things that are difficult to accept while you're attending to your body. So it's almost like you're encouraging your mind to become more accepting by bringing acceptance into your body. The next step is to list all the behaviors you would do if you did accept the facts, and then act as if you've already accepted the facts. So engage in behaviors that you would do if you really had accepted. So for me, what that looked like was at the beginning of the pandemic, needing to shut down the clinic at Toronto Western, the Artist Health Center. So even though in my mind I wasn't ready to accept, in my behaviors I was practicing acceptance because I had to. But the act of doing that, of shutting down the clinic, helps to bring my mind to a place of acceptance. And then lastly, allowing disappointments and sadness or grief to rise within you. So like I had mentioned before, that by practicing acceptance, that can potentially lead to sadness, but by allowing that experience, that in turn can help to bring a sense of calmness to us. That's it for the distress tolerance skills that I wanted to share with you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I'll probably keep talking because I know that there's a little bit of a delay. But if anybody does have any questions or comments, certainly feel free to let us know. And I'm happy to address them now. And we'll also leave some time at the end to answer some questions. So if anything comes up along the way, I'm happy to leave some space at the end of the presentation to answer some questions as well. Cool. Okay, so I hope that you're all still with me. I hope that I haven't put anybody to sleep yet. I'm gonna move away from the distress tolerance skills into skills that we can practice every day to help to keep ourselves more regulated emotionally in general. I'm really happy to offer a specific type of meditation right now. I'm gonna teach you what's called the loving kindness meditation. The reason that I really like this meditation is that, like, one fairly common thing that I've seen, like certainly in myself and amongst my patients that I've been working with, is worry and concern about the safety of oneself and the safety of others as well. it is really challenging when it's hard to think of tangible things that we can do for other people. Like if I'm just thinking about one patient I was working with who was really worried about the safety of her family members in another country. And one thing that we did was do this meditation to, instead of tangibly doing something, to offer these words of kindness and compassion and love through our meditation. It potentially can be a really soothing thing. So I'm saying yes to meditation. Okay, that's great. So I'll go ahead with it. What I'll get you to do is to sit comfortably, or you can even lie down wherever you are. If you're sitting, try to have your 2 feet on the floor. You can try out that willing hands posture that we talked about. So the palms face up on your lap or on the armrest. You can even do that if you're lying down as well. If you feel comfortable, I will get you to close your eyes. But if you don't feel comfortable, I'll just get you to choose a place to keep your focus in the room. And to describe the meditation maybe just a little bit more fully, what we'll do first is offer ourselves the words of loving kindness. Then we're going to think about somebody who we love or care about and offer them those same words. Then we're going to think about a neutral person. So maybe somebody who you see on a regular basis but don't know. So like somebody at the grocery store or a neighbor. And then we're going to try to practice with somebody who maybe have a difficult relationship with, and see if we can offer them the same words. And then lastly, we'll offer the words out to sort of the world or in general. Okay. So to begin, take a few slow, long deep breaths and relax. Slowly breathe in through your nose, and then slowly exhale through your mouth. Feel your stomach rise and fall as you breathe. Feel your lungs fill up with air. And with each breath, just notice how your body feels more and more relaxed. Now, as you continue to breathe, just quietly to yourself, offer yourself following words of loving kindness. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be held in loving kindness. May you feel my love now. May I accept myself just as I am. May I be happy. And may I know the natural joy of being alive. And again, as you continue to breathe, try to bring to mind somebody you love, somebody you care for. You bring that person to your attention. Again, just silently to yourself, offer them the words of loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be held in loving kindness. May you feel my love now. May you accept yourself just as you are. May you be happy. May you know the natural joy of being alive. And again, as you continue to breathe, bring your attention to a neutral person in your life. Again, maybe that's a neighbor or somebody who works at the local grocery store. And as you bring your attention to that person, see if you can offer them the same words of loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be held in loving kindness. May you feel my love now. May you accept yourself just as you are. May you be happy. May you know the natural joy of being alive. And next, what we'll do is try to bring your attention to somebody who you've had a difficult relationship with. Maybe this is somebody who you don't like to have compassion or sympathy for. Try to see if you can offer this person the same words of loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be held in loving kindness. May you feel my love now. May you accept yourself just as you are. May you be happy. May you know the natural joy of being alive. And now allow your awareness to open out in all directions. To yourself, to a loved one, a neutral person, and a difficult person. And of all beings, humans and animals living everywhere. Aware of all the joys and sorrows that all beings experience. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be happy. May all beings awaken and be free. May all beings be happy. Now bring this practice to a close by coming back to extend kindness to yourself. Spend some time basking in the energy of loving kindness that may have been generated here. Now bring your attention back to your breath. And just take a few more slow, long, deep breaths. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and return your focus to the room. Okay. So feel free certainly to share your reactions to that meditation. Certainly feel free to ask any questions at this point. Again, I'll just kind of keep rolling with the presentation, but of course at any time if anything comes up, any questions or comments, please feel free to share. Okay. All right, and so again, I hope that everybody's doing okay. Hope that everybody's still here with me. I don't know if the meditation put anybody to sleep, but we'll keep on rolling with the presentation. One thing that I wanted to to speak about was that, like, we all have had our own very unique reactions to this pandemic. Like, no two people are exactly alike, and our reactions to things can even be complicated. Like, I was spending some time thinking about the National Youth Orchestra tour and it being canceled for this year. And I would imagine that certainly there would be disappointment. But at the same time, I kind of wonder if some people might have felt relieved as well. Like, performing can be stressful, and relief is a very normal response. Other normal responses might be anger or frustration, sadness. Guilt is a big one that I've been coming across, especially amongst my patients who maybe are feeling good right now. Like, the pandemic has sort of forced a pause onto people. And for those that audition or put their art out into the world, like, this has offered an opportunity to not experience the stress of auditioning or of putting out a piece of work. And so like, to some extent, some people are feeling good. And I've come across some people that are feeling guilty about feeling good. And so I wanted to spend some time just talking about the concepts of invalidation and validation. Like, one of the ways that we invalidate ourselves is when we try to push away whatever our emotions are, or like, think that we shouldn't feel a certain way. Invalidation is a critical concept when it comes to our mental health, because experiences with invalidation can be powerful emotions. This is something that I talk about a lot with artists, because there potentially are opportunities or experiences of invalidation that are quite common, like rejections and criticism. So what I want us to do is try to work on responding to our emotional experiences, whatever they are, with a sense of curiosity, with compassion, and with an openness. We can sort of describe our different emotional reactions as parts of ourselves. And again, what I want us to try to work on is being curious and compassionate and open towards these different parts that we experience. I'm going to share with you another acronym. We'll get your thoughts on it. But this next acronym is REGAIN. The RE is one word, GAIN. So the RE stands for recognize. And maybe, sorry, I might pull back and just say that, like, this acronym is a skill that helps us to work on being curious and compassionate and validating towards our parts, towards our emotional experiences. So the RE stands for recognize. So what that means is just say to yourself, I am feeling blank. Fill in the blank, whatever that feeling is. Then we want to ground ourselves. That's the G. So grounding means bringing yourself to the present, because so much of our emotional experiences are past or future. So we want to ground by bringing our attention just to our breath. Focus on some long breaths. The A stands for allow. So if safe, if tolerable, allow yourself to experience your emotion and try to practice observing it as well. See if you can maybe even pull away from the emotional experience and just notice what it's like to feel that feeling. The I stands for investigate. So, like, what is this emotion telling me? Why might it be here exactly? And then the N stands for nourish, which means offer that emotion or that part something that can help it to feel calm. I don't know if that made sense for everybody, but I'll maybe illustrate it with a personal example. So this is several years ago now, but I went camping for the first time in my life. I'm from the city, and going up there, I was really excited to go camping. This might sound a random, but there's a point to the story. So I was really excited to go up camping. And when I got there, I was really caught off guard by this, overwhelming feeling of sadness. I really didn't know what that was all about exactly. And instead of beating myself up about feeling sad during this experience, I practiced the regain skill. So first I recognized, I said, okay, I'm feeling sad. I brought my attention to my breath to try to ground myself, bring myself to the present. I spent some time allowing the experience of sadness, just kind of spending some time on my own, just letting myself feel sad for a little bit. And then the investigate part was really helpful because after spending some time investigating the part, sort of exploring why it was there, I came to the conclusion that in the not too distant past at that point, I had a pretty bad breakup with somebody who was pretty outdoorsy. And when I made that link, I started to think, you know what, like this sadness makes perfect sense. Like this is a totally normal and valid response to this experience because I think anyway, this camping trip is reminding me of this past painful event. And then I was able to nourish myself by offering myself that compassionate response to the sadness, like saying to myself, you know, like this emotion makes perfect sense that I would feel sad because perhaps I'm being reminded of a shitty time in my life, of a painful time in my life. And by using the regain skill, I was able to validate my emotional response. And in turn, it helped to soothe the sadness. And I was much more able to be present with my friends and with the camping trip. So long story short, we want to use the regain skill to try to help us to make sense of our experiences so that we can offer them validation, which in turn can help to soothe our emotions and help to soothe us as individuals. So maybe I'll just say it one more time. So regain, the RE stands for recognize. Like say to yourself, I'm feeling this way. The G stands for ground, so bring your attention to your breath, to bring yourself to the present. Allow, so if you can tolerate it, allow the emotion to happen and try to practice observing it. Almost try to pull yourself away to see if you can notice what the emotion is and what it feels like. Investigate it, so what is this emotion telling me? Where might it have come from? And then nourish, so offer your part something that can help it to feel calm, or emotion. Cool. Okay. I'm going to pretend that there's an audience in front of me that is loving everything that I'm saying here since I can't see any. Okay, so I am going to move on to talk a little bit about the concept of imposter syndrome. Just as I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking maybe I should throw something in that's like a little bit outside of the scope of the pandemic, but a very relevant topic to artists just in general. Like the regain skill is something that can help with the experience of imposter syndrome because it's a validating thing. But I'm gonna share with you some other tips around how to cope and manage with it. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the concept of imposter syndrome, it's a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist. Imposters suffer from chronic self-doubt and a sense of intellectual fraudulence that override any feelings of success or external proof of their competence. It's quite a common experience in artistic populations. In fact, Maya Angelou, one of the world's most famous poets to have ever lived, is fairly well known for struggling with imposter syndrome. And what do we do about that exactly? Well, the first step for me is working on changing our perspective on failure and maybe even practicing failure. Like one thing that can really maintain imposter syndrome is fear or worry about failure, because sometimes we feel like if we fail, that feeds that belief that we're actually imposters. And so it's important for us to try to change our perspective on what it means to fail and to maybe even develop some tolerance to it. I don't know if anybody here watched the Netflix series The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls docu-series, but Michael Jordan has a pretty famous quote where he says, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I..." So MJ, the great MJ, had a belief that failure was actually necessary in order to succeed. And if we can have an openness to it, that can really help us to not feel like such an imposter. We can also practice failure, which is maybe a little bit of a funny topic, but afterwards I can share with you a TED Talk by a man who sort of realized that his fear over rejection or over failure was actually getting in the way of his success. And so he started to make a list of things that he could do to actually practice rejection and failure. Certainly this can sound like an overwhelming thing, but he ended up having fun with it, and maybe you could too. So he would do things like ask a random stranger for $100 with the purpose of doing something that would likely get a no, would likely get a rejection or a failure. Then he went to a burger joint and asked for a burger refill as opposed to a pop refill, which of course got a no. But the interesting thing about this TED Talk is that he goes into a donut store and asks for them to make donuts in the shape of the Olympic rings for him, and they do it. And the turning point in that part of the story is that he realized that you can actually do things where you think you're going to fail and it can actually work out well for you. And I think that that's an important concept when it comes to helping us with our fears of being an imposter or fears of failure, that if we practice it, we can actually come to the realization that we might think that we're going to fail, and in the end we might actually succeed. So yeah, I'll send you the link to the TED Talk afterwards if you're interested. Just a couple more points. Being open to vulnerability. So I listened to one of the National Youth Orchestra talks, and the speaker was speaking about Brene Brown and vulnerability. I would really encourage you to check out her work. She talks a lot about the power of vulnerability, about how it can be really helpful with us succeeding in our lives, that we very commonly shy away from any experiences where we're potentially vulnerable. And there's a lot of power in opening ourselves up to the possibility of being vulnerable, like an audition, for example. Like, that's a very vulnerable thing. And if we were totally avoidant of vulnerability, you would not get into the National Youth Orchestra because you didn't put yourself out there. So I certainly appreciate the vulnerability that you've already experienced in yourselves by allowing yourself the opportunity to audition and to join us here. But yeah, it gets a bit maybe outside of the scope of this talk, but I'll just encourage you to check out some Brene Brown talks on vulnerability because it's helpful. And then the last thing is practicing self-compassion. So maybe asking ourselves questions like, if my best friend or someone I loved had this thought, what would I tell them? We're really good about helping to support other people through their struggles, but it can be difficult to do it for ourselves. So trying to work on talking to ourselves as though we were talking to somebody who we loved. Or if my best friend or someone who loves me knew I was thinking this thought, what would they say to me? What evidence would they point out to me that would suggest that my thoughts were not 100% true? And lastly, when I'm not feeling this way, do I think about this situation any differently, and how? Yeah. So to tie that all up, imposter syndrome. It's a bit of an aside from the experience of the pandemic, but it was a topic that crossed my mind because it's important, I think, especially in artistic populations. And I don't know. I wonder if the pandemic has impacted anybody's experiences with imposter syndrome, and hopefully some of these tips and strategies will be helpful for you. All right, so we're at 2:40. As always, I'll just sort of check in and ask if there's any questions or comments, and I will continue to carry on with the last section. I just got actually one more section to offer, which are just general mental health tips and tools. All right. So the first one, like the question there. How do you prevent that fear of failure from taking over? Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It makes me think about different things, like using that regained skill perhaps to try to create some separation between us and the fear, kind of observing it and trying to, like, instead of push it away, actually welcoming it and trying to think, like, what is this here for? What is this fear telling me exactly? It makes me think about mindfulness, of course. Like, mindfulness is all about bringing the mind to the present moment. So fear, of course, is worry about what might happen in the future, and mindfulness helps us to just bring our mind back to the present moment. If the anxiety or the fear of failure is really, really overwhelming, we can try to practice some of those distress tolerance skills. So like the TIP skill or self-soothing or radical acceptance. This is not something to be done in the moment, but as sort of like a preemptive, protective thing, you could do some of that work around exposing yourself to failure. So developing a tolerance to failure by actually practicing it. And again, I'll send you that TED Talk. And so I hope that all of that is helpful. I guess lastly, like I think like talking about it is one of the most important things. So that's something that certainly I'm not the best at, talking about my worries or my fears, but the more that we can have an openness to sharing our experiences with safe people, of course, like we don't want to say, hey, I'm afraid of failure, and say that to somebody who's a jerk. But if you can have a person who's safe to speak to, like talking about it is something that can be so useful. Particularly like for me, like when I do these talks, I'm in person with people generally, and we're a group, and it's such a normal thing for there to be multiple people in the group who have had the same experience. And that to me is something that's so powerful. Like when we can really truly and have proof realize that we're not alone in our experiences, that is something that's so validating, so soothing. Okay. Leo has asked, I'm curious if you have any tips on achieving a feeling of resetting. I'm noticing a disturbing feeling recently that the past few months have just felt like a single long day. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm not, like one thing that I'm finding interesting is people's conception of time right now. I took a trip right before the pandemic struck, and that feels like it was yesterday. But a lot of the time, for me personally, my days feel like they are just so long, and I don't know if that's sort of the reaction that you're experiencing. Past few months have just felt like a single long day. Yeah, that just things feel like a really, really long day. So like one thing that comes to mind is actually the next skill that I was going to tell you about, which is the skill of accumulating positive experiences. This is really something that can go out the window when we're under stress, but like as simple as it sounds, it is so important to make sure that you are doing things for fun. And if we're not doing things for fun, that of course can lead to accumulation of stress. And so even if you don't feel like it, making sure that you are doing at least one thing for fun is so important. I needed this just the other day, actually. Like I just realized, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I need to do something. And so I ended up pouring myself a drink, chatting with friends, turning on music, dancing, like just doing something that actually feels good. And the more that we on purpose accumulate positive experiences, the better that we can feel. I don't know if this is helpful at all, but the thought popped into my head about meaning making in our experiences. Like one thing that can help when we're feeling stressed is to try to find meaning in our experiences, whatever those are. Like even in the most stressful of times, oftentimes we can glean some sort of meaning in the experience. A part of me kind of wants to throw it to anybody that's here listening to the talk, and to see if anybody else has any thoughts about that, about anything that you maybe found useful to not feel like this whole thing is just sort of one big slog. I like just like different thoughts are going to come to mind as I continue to talk. I kind of wonder about reminding yourself that there is an endpoint to this, which is really tough. I think like when we've been going through this for more than 2 months now. Like Ontario has been under a state of emergency for more than 2 months, and I think it's difficult to remember that there's an end to it. So I wonder about that idea, about maybe spending some time remembering that there is an end point to this, that things are going to slowly open back up. And then I think about being accepting and okay with whatever emotions come up for you, even as you think about things opening back up again. Like that could be a really, really scary and overwhelming thing. And spending some time allowing for that experience to happen, perhaps is something that can be useful. I hope all of that made sense, and I hope all of that is helpful. If you have any follow-up questions or any follow-up comments, please feel free to share them with me. I know that wasn't a completely fulsome answer, but I hope some of that was helpful. I'm not a routine person, so I just got another question, so I'm just gonna read it. I'm not a routine person, but creating a simple but solid routine of starting the day or going to bed has made it easier to separate each day. Yeah, totally. Great. Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Sarah, for offering that. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Lucy says, setting a daily routine might be helpful. That's something I'm trying to work on. Yeah, great. Perfect. Yeah. So that makes me think about actually another emotion regulation skill that's important, which is, we call it reducing our vulnerability to emotions. There's another acronym, please. The PL is a bit of a stretch. It stands for physical illness. So what that means is if they use the P of physical and then the first L of illness. Physical illness means like if we're feeling sick in any kind of way, making sure that we do what we need to do to feel better, like treat our bodies well, eat well, get a good night's rest. Sleep is a really big one. That's the S of please. So making sure that you're getting a good night's rest. Like the better that we sleep, the more regulated our emotions are going to be. E is eating, like eating balanced meals. So like with the routine idea, like making sure that we're having balanced meals throughout the day, and certainly the healthier that we eat, the more regulated emotionally we're going to feel. The A stands for avoid mood altering substances. So as best as we can, just sort of paying attention to how drugs or alcohol impact our experiences with mental health, and avoiding them as needed to help ourselves to stay regulated. And then exercise. So getting an exercise routine in there. So yeah, like I really like the idea of routine, and as best as you can, try to incorporate those ideas of getting a good night's rest, eating solid, balanced meals, trying to avoid mood altering substances, and getting exercise. Cool. Okay, just a few more that I've got here. So we talked about accumulating positive experiences. We talked about reducing your vulnerability through that PLEASE acronym. Gratitude journaling is a big one for me. So what that means is just every day, like spending some time writing down things that you're grateful for, like 2 to 3 things maybe. And it doesn't need to be new things every day necessarily, but if we can spend some time every day focusing on things that we're grateful for, that can really help to reframe the way that we're thinking. Like when we're not practicing gratitude, we can, of course, think about things that we don't have in our lives, things that are maybe going wrong. Gratitude journaling really helps us to bring our attention to things that we do have in our lives right now in this moment. Like it could be, again, in Toronto anyway, the nice weather, it's getting a bit cloudy, but the nice weather that we've been having recently. It could be the home that you're in. It could be this opportunity to gather together. Doesn't matter what it is that you're grateful for, but just spending some time actually writing down what you're grateful for, gratitude journaling, it is useful. I like writing better than just thinking about it. I find that there's maybe more intentionality and more of an effect when we actually write it down. Yeah, so again, just writing down 2 to 3 things that you're grateful for. So there's another question. Do you have any advice for those nasty, pessimistic days where no fun activities are fun? I hate the feeling of spending a day in bed, but I've definitely had too many of those lately. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question. Like definitely our mood impacts the way that we feel and the way that we think. And so if we're feeling down, it can take away from our experience of potentially fun activities. Like one thing that comes to mind for me is mindfulness. So if you're able to engage in some sort of activity that's potentially fun, really trying to draw your attention to your five senses during it. Try to be unmindful of worries. Like if a worry or a pessimistic thought pops in, try to see if you can allow that to come and go, and then bring your attention back to whatever it is that you're doing. Like definitely, like even with my cup of coffee here, like the more, like if I'm just kind of drinking it mindlessly, I'm not going to have the same experience as if I'm going to just stop and pay attention to what it looks like and smells like and feels like and tastes like. I should take a swig right now. I'm noticing my throat getting kind of dry. In cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk about, it's called behavioral activation, which essentially means like the more that we engage in activities, the better that we can feel, really, in a nutshell, which is super tough. So what we do is we give people calendars to actually fill in set times during the day to engage in some activities. And the goal there is to, even if you don't feel like it, do it anyway. Like you might not feel like doing it, and the motivation and the good feelings could potentially come afterwards. So one thing that could be really tricky is, of course, it's such a normal thing to wait for motivation to strike before doing anything. And the reverse is actually often true, that the more that we engage in the activities first, potentially the positive feelings or the motivation can come afterwards. A part of me wants to speak about self-compassion, though. Like sometimes we need those days where we just lie in bed. Like I know that I most definitely do. Like sometimes I'm feeling down or feeling overwhelmed, and all I want to do is just go to bed. Sometimes there's thoughts of, no, you should stay active, keep going. But like oftentimes I think, like, what is a compassionate thing that I can do for myself here? And sometimes a compassionate thing might be giving yourself that opportunity to lie in bed for a little while and see if that's something that potentially can feel better. And I hope that was okay. I hope that was a response that was helpful in some sort of way. Definitely feel free to follow up with another question, or feel free to follow up with some comments. I'm just reviewing the question one more time. Do you have any advice for those nasty, pessimistic days where no fun activities too fun? I hate the feeling of spending a day in bed, but I've definitely had too many of those lately. Yeah. And I guess just as I review the question one more time, the last thing that comes to mind is the concept of co-regulation. So one way in which we regulate our nervous systems is in relation to other people. This is something that actually I've needed to do personally. So what that means is, like, it can be difficult, of course, to do those activities on our own. And so if possible, see if there's a supportive person who you can do any kind of activity with, whether that be like somebody in your home, if there's other people in your home, or for me, I live on my own. So all of my social interaction has been through virtual platforms. And like I've done puzzles with a friend. I've cooked with a friend. I've done some exercise with friends, and sometimes I really needed to do that because it was just too tough to do it on my own. So a part of me wonders about, if possible, trying to engage in some activities with another person, like no matter what it is. And co-regulation teaches us that can help us with regulating our nervous systems. We're at 55 minutes. I'm just gonna say a couple of things real quick. I just want to mention worry time. So if you struggle with worries, one thing that you could try to do is to compartmentalize worries. So like actually having a worry time, like from 2 to 2:15 in the afternoon, that's worry time. Outside of worry time, worry is unproductive. So what we want to do is actually write down a worry and say, okay, I'm not going to worry about this right now. I'll worry about this during my worry time. Then you can bring your attention to the present by bringing your attention to your 5 senses or to your breath. And then again, if a worry pops up, okay, I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm going to worry about it during my worry time. And then again, 5 senses, pay attention to breath. And then when worry time comes the next day, that potentially could be a problem-solving time. So if some of your worries are solvable, this could be a good time to practice solving them, or it could be a good time to try to practice that radical acceptance. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's all that I've got for today, as we're approaching the hour mark. I got a question about any useful apps that I might recommend. I really like Wobot, W-O-B-O-T. Wobot is super cool. Like it's a cute app that reminds you to practice some mental health skills. I'm a big fan of the Worry Time app, so there's actually an app for that. There's Headspace and the Calm app, and there are way more that are not going to come to my mind, but I will be able to send them out to people afterwards, because I do have some that we sent out to the patients of the Artist Health Center. But one thing that came to mind is Yoga with Adrian. I don't know if anybody's done Yoga with Adrian before, but it's a YouTube channel. And for those that are interested in yoga, I love Yoga with Adrian because they're not too long. They're very relevant, and there's just something about her, Adrian, personality that I find really okay, great. So Katrina says that helped. It's hard for me to practice to do daily chores when I can't find motivation to do things I find more fun, like watching Netflix or doing puzzles. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and with things like chores, like sometimes it's useful to try to place the focus more on the stuff that's for fun, or the stuff that's maybe more compassionate, because like if we do those things, we might start to feel a little bit better, which potentially can help us to engage in different chores around the house. Okay, so that's all that I've got for today. I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I really do hope that you found it useful. I am offering next week a meditation class. So what I'll do next week is just go through a series of different types of meditation with you all. But for now, just thanks for joining me, everybody.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today. It's really nice to hear that we're not alone in having our feelings, and that we're allowed to have them and to accept them even. So it was really nice, and thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you.
Have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.